main thing was always the music. I don't give a fuck about what kind of scene I belong. I'm not a part of this sheepish mentality at all. I do my thing, and if there's somebody who disapproves of what I'm doing, well, okay, too bad for them. You know, I keep moving on, and I do my thing, and I follow my heart, and that's the only thing that matters in the end of the day.
Greetings, friends. Welcome to episode 184 of Into the Necrosphere. This week, I am sitting down with black metal royalty Rune Eriksen, otherwise known as Blasphemer, joins me to talk about the absolutely sensational new record by Ruim, his new black metal project. We also spoke at length about his time in Mayhem. We spoke about his approach to songwriting. We spoke about the recording of one of my favorite ever Mayhem records, Ordo.ko. It was a comprehensive, very insightful conversation, during which he actually set me straight on a couple of things as well. So that is going to be coming your way very soon. But before we get to that, Quell, headed up by the great Evan Hopper, who has been on this podcast many times before, are about to drop their new record. The album is called All That Was and Never Will Be. And Evan has kindly gifted us with the world premiere of the new Quell single. So, for your listening pleasure, this is Quell with Him to the Blackened Moor. You just heard the world premiere of Hymn to a Blackened Maw, off of the forthcoming Quell record, All That Was and Never Will Be. Thank you so much to my brother Evan Hopper for choosing this podcast to premiere his new single. This, I believe, is our third world premiere of the year, which I think is pretty goddamn special. And the other thing that I would say is it is long overdue for young Evan to get his scrawny butt back on the podcast. So I'm going to make that happen. And in the meantime, you make sure that you go check out the Quell Bandcamp. Give Evan your ducats and your love and support, especially when the new album comes out. Also, fun fact, you may have picked up a second vocal track on that song. That vocal track belongs to none other than the great Mike Hill of Tombs and Scorpion Throne. But great song, and this album, I think, is going to do great things for Quell. If you are new to the podcast, my friends, make sure that you do not leave the subscribe button unsmashed on your platform of choice. Follow me on social media, and if you really want to show your love and support to the show, make sure you head over to the Into the Necrosphere Teespring store, where you will find all sorts of Into the Necrosphere t-shirts, hoodies, and other cool swag. Also, perhaps most critically, make sure that you are following my fellow horsemen of the podcasting apocalypse. Every second Monday, my friend Brandon Legion brings you writers, directors, other luminaries working in the horror industry with his podcast, Horror Wolf 666. Every Tuesday, yours truly casts hexes and slays poses on Into the Necrosphere. Every Wednesday, Sensei Mike Hill brings you his long-running podcast, Everything Went Black. He returns on a Thursday with my favorite podcast of the week, Necromaniacs, the best horror podcast in the world. He reviews old and new horror movies alongside his co-hosts Sheriff Mike Scandado and Professor Jeff Kashid. And then every Sunday, the Reverend Carl Haikara takes you on a journey into the arcane, the weird, the occult, and the esoteric with his podcast, Soul Knox. I am going to be on a future episode of Soul Knox. We did a deep dive into the Paradise Lost discography, went through every single record, shared our thoughts on each, and also our favorite tracks from each. So really fun conversation with him. That's going to be coming your way probably in the next 2 weeks. And another plug that I wanted to get in: The Nightmare Cabin is a YouTube channel run by my friend Joe Denby. I am a guest on a current episode that he's posted where we did a deep dive into the Napalm Death back catalog. So check that out. It's going to be, I believe, a 3 or a 4-parter. On this first episode, we've done the first 4 records in the Napalm Death canon. Really fun catching up with him. And if you like those kinds of, album deep dives or band deep dives, Joe does plenty of those. So make sure that you are showing him plenty of support as well. A couple of quick things to get out the way just before we get started. Number one, if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll notice the shades are back on. Yes, to the question about whether my fucking blepharitis has flared back up again. And the reason for wearing the shades is I don't want to end up looking like I fell into the same ooze that spawned the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So no other reason for it. I'm not trying to look cool. It's just how things are. Hopefully one of the last times that I have to do this. Also, I had some technical issues, or at least I should say Blasphemer had some technical issues on his side, and so therefore he couldn't be on camera. I have taken the trouble of inserting a very beautiful and elegant waveform alongside a profile photo next to my video. So that took a fucking lot of effort, and I hope you guys appreciate it. Also, don't go anywhere when my conversation with Blasphemer is done, because I'm going to be reviewing the new Ekrom record. And then there is a new MARDUK single, a new Incantation single, and a new Till the Dirt single out, amongst others. And where better to decide whether or not they cut the mustard than on my weekly news rant. So do stick around for that. Right now, though, sit back, enjoy as I welcome to the podcast for the first time, definitely not the last time, Rune Eriksen, a.k.a. Blasphemer. Welcome to Into the Necrosphere. I think I deliberately kept this quiet so that, I'll probably share something about this on the socials when you and I are done talking, but I suspect that based on the response that people have had to this Ruim record, most people that listen to this podcast are probably going to have conniptions when they find out you're going to be on the show. So, question for you, just to kind of start things off with, the response to Black Royal Spiritism has been just absolutely insane. So I mean, I don't think I've seen a single review. I've not spoken to a single person that's not talking about it as though it's one of the best records of the year. I mean, every single review, every single comment is just overwhelmingly positive. How do you feel about the response now that the record has been out for a couple of weeks and people are, are living with it a little bit, and you're kind of getting a sense of what, fans and what critics feel about the new music that you've put out?
Well, to begin with, I think I said something like, I kind of promised myself that I wouldn't, obsess about reviews and, going online and checking all my stuff like every 2 or 3 days, like I used to do in the past. It's like, hey, what do people think about this and about that? So this time I was kind of, like, fuck it. This is me. This is 100% at least my take on black metal. And if you don't like it, then well, great. If you love it, also great, And so, but yeah, I mean, it's like just looking back to some of the initial ideas, and then it's like, really, is this really happening? So I kind of, just started to pay attention to it not for fun, but, it's like, really, is this the general consensus about the record? So it's like, yeah, I'm really surprised. And I'm happy, super happy, because I poured so much energy and so much, literally blood, sweat, and tears into the record, So, of course, it's great to be rewarded in that sense, if you know what I mean. So I'm just super stoked. Everybody that I'm talking to, as you mentioned as well, is like having really positive things to say about the record. And I don't think I have read one bad comment or review yet. So, well, I'm sure it will come at one point. But yeah, so far so good, Couldn't ask for more, really.
It's an interesting thing as well that you've just touched on now. It's a very, very personal album, because you're doing every single thing on this album except for playing the drums, and obviously the odd guest appearance that you have, and these songs go. I mean, from what I've read, they date all the way back to 1998. Some of the riffs, some of the ideas.
No, I must interfere with your thing here, because this is really not true at all. And really? It kind of bugs me. Yeah, it bugs me quite a bit, actually, because everybody got the notion that this was something that was written and not used, and it's absolutely bollocks, man. It has nothing to do with the past whatsoever. So the thing, I don't recall exactly what the Peaceville newsletter said, or the press release, but it was something like it was inspired by a long lost tape or whatever, something like that.
Well, the impression that it created was that you were rummaging around in the attic one day, and then you discovered a tape of Mayhem demos. You're like, yay, let's turn this into an album.
No, it's really not like that at all. So this is quite interesting, and it's something I wanted to express. Really, it's like, I don't know. I can understand now. It's like, people are asking me these things, but I'm not really sure how it started. If it was like, it was hinted at that in the press release, or if somebody with authority kind of claimed that they knew something about it. I have no idea. But you're hearing it from me now, and I have 100% authority. And I will tell you that there's nothing old on this record whatsoever. Every riff was written between April 2020 and August 2021. So the thing is, it was inspired by, perhaps to a certain degree, that is like, oh shit, this is how I used to do it. It's like, let's try. Let's hear how it would sound today if I, try to get into the same frame of mind. So essentially, that's what happened. So that's the inspirational part. You know what I mean? It's like I can get inspired by numerous things, being it nature, well, you name it, really. So it's nothing more to it than just as like thinking back in time and just like, fuck, I used to do this shit, and in all honesty, why would I go back and you use leftover stuff from late 90s in my stuff. You know, it's like, if you think about that, and if you chew on that for a while, then you kind of realize that why would I do that? I am always going forward. You know, I never look back in anything I do. I never repeat an album twice. And for me to go back and to use some stuff that wasn't good enough for Mayhem back in 1998 or whatever, it's just absurd. So obviously there's no truth to this. This is a brand new record. The only hints to the past is, of course, my reinterpretation of Follow Seraphs, and to a certain extent, the song sung in Norwegian, Evig Dissonans. It's like kind of a retrospective lyrics in a way, looking back to 1994 when I first joined Mayhem, you know, and when everything kind of started. If you understand what I mean. So it's really. Yeah, so it's really nothing old at all, and I know that probably a lot of, black metal romantics will will find it disappointing, but this is the truth. It's really nothing of old on this one. It's just I use the tape just to kind of get myself in a kind of a certain mind frame, if you understand.
It's interesting because there are definitely hints on this record back to some of the early stuff, but I mean, you can hear it's very forward facing. It's very new. I said to you, I don't normally prepare for any of these, but one of the things that I do from time to time is I'll dig up some old interviews. I saw an interview that you did back in, I think this was 2000, and it was posted on the Season of Mist YouTube channel. You were very young. I don't know what year it was properly recorded in, but you were backstage getting ready. And one of the things that I found very interesting about that interview is the guy asks you about joining Mayhem, and then he talks to you about your vision for playing in Mayhem, and you talk about wanting to expand the black metal genre, but that at the time you felt like a lot of fans didn't kind of understand what you wanted to achieve. And I definitely feel, listening to this record, there was something to me that about that interview that fit in very well with the feel that I get from this album, because to me this album takes there are I'm trying to think of the right word. There's elements of particularly Auto Ad Chaos for me that kind of would marry up to this record, but this is like the spiritual successor to that album for me in particular. And I've asked a couple of people about it, and they all agreed, and we hadn't, there's nothing pre-discussed. We were just like, yeah, there's just something about this. It feels like it's like the next step up, obviously just done with a lot more intensity, a little bit scaled back on the discordance.
Well, the thing is, I guess I can't say you're wrong. That's the thing. It's like, do I feel it like that? I'm not so sure, but at the same time, I kind of do as well. The point is that you're tapping into some kind of a current, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
So that's for me is that kind of a black metal. Call it what you want, like the energy, the spirit, whatever, and that's what I'm trying to tap into. But I'm trying to tap into it from a different point of view, and also from actually with a different kind of intent, which I think is very important to state here as well. Hence the theme of the record. But I agree with you, and that's like. I think that it really is my essence in terms of black metal. What you hear on this record is like it came very natural. I didn't, it's like one thing that sometimes I've been asked is like, do you plan ahead? Do you, create almost rules in how an album should sound or be like? And I was like, no, I can't, because I am trying to be some kind of a vehicle for the music itself, for the expression. So anything really can happen, but of course I shape it into I've been known to be doing, ever since '97 and most of this. So yeah, it's in that sense I can both see that there's stuff from the past on this record, and also something that's even pointing to the future, maybe more specifically the more ambient parts, which maybe wouldn't be possible to kind of do in a, let's say, when I played in Mayhem. So I think I took that part much further on this record. And again, who knows what the second record will contain of small surprises as well. It's like we just got to keep on moving. And yeah, I guess you're right. It is essentially the follow up to Orda in my mind, because again, I haven't done black metal since either. I've done a lot of different things, but I never ventured into what I consider to be black metal. Extreme music, yes, but not black metal. So yeah,
I think what probably got my gears spinning on that one was listening to the title track on this record, and that immediately that last kind of that sort of very simple guitar melody that you have towards the back end of the song, that took me straight back to probably one of my favorite moments or my high points on Ordo at Chaos, which is that guitar melody that you have at the end of Illuminate, which is just that is like, to me, I've spoken about it on the podcast well before Ruim came out, and I was like, that is like the apex for me of elite black metal. And so it was like those little Easter eggs almost on scattered across the record that kind of took me back to that album. But the more you're explaining it, the more it kind of makes sense the way I see it in my mind as well, like that it's kind of that successive next step on from that record.
Another interesting thing though is that riff that you're referring to, the last riff on Illuminate was actually the last riff I wrote from Mayhem. Period. Really? Yeah, it was kind of a waving goodbye. If you think about it, when I'm telling you now, and then you listen to it again, and you will see what I mean. Yeah, it's almost like farewell. So that's quite interesting, actually. So yeah, that was definitely the last thing I did, last riff that I did for the band, and it was the last song that we completed for the session back in whenever it was. So yeah, but it's I have this capability, I have this strength of going into, I can do literally, not to sound arrogant or pompous or whatever, but I can do a lot of different vibes and emotions in my music. And this is something, when I do this kind of, as you say, this kind of more simplistic, but it's kind of very sorrowful melodies, it's just feel I connect so much to it. And again, it's also on the last track on my record, Osima da Igreja. It's something in the middle there, and it's also something in the end of Black Royal Spiritus in the song. So yeah, it's I don't know. It just really feels like it's an essential part of me. This kind of put a bit dramatic, some kind of maybe some kind of a spiritual sadness to a certain extent, and I love the vibe it gives. It's kind of a comforting vibe. I think it's beautiful. It's not ugly. It's beautiful, but it's also kind of maybe a bit strange in the setting where it's coming from. So yeah.
Well, you know what I would liken it to, and this is maybe going to sound a little bit abstract, but like when I listen to music, oftentimes you visualize something as you're listening to the music, and I find it's only with the very best records that happens. But if I get it, if I think about that Illuminate ending, it's like a candle flickering in the dark, that final that final melody, because you're surrounded by this swirling, oppressive, really dark atmosphere. And then there's this one kind of very simple melody that comes out there, and as you say, it kind of has this comforting element to it, almost in the way that a lone candle flickering in the dark is going to give you some degree of comfort, that you're not just surrounded by demons and monsters and whatever else. I'm thinking out loud, so I'm kind of just saying whatever's coming into my head now. But that's sure. Kind of how I've always envisioned it. I mean, I remember hearing that album for the first time and like properly experiencing it, and it's I still put it in like my top 5 just most visceral experiences of listening to a black metal record, because it was like, it was intense on a level that goes way beyond just, you know, fast music or music that's aggressive. It's an album that kind of burrows into your soul, you know, and there's very, very, very few albums that can do that, but that one does it extremely well. I feel like Black Royal Spiritism does it very well too.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, as I told you, that I put a lot of energy into this record. It also happened to be created at the right time, I guess, you know, during pandemic, where pretty much everything was miserable. We couldn't really go out, and well, I guess you know how it was. You remember how it was. So yeah, it's like one thing that I value the most is the freedom, you know, to literally do and express and think and, you know, like act accordingly to whatever I want, you know. And that was kind of robbed totally from us during this period. So it was like I wouldn't say it was necessarily introverted journey, but essentially it was. But then when I started to jam with Cesar over in Dijon in France, it became a kind of a different beast altogether. It came somehow more violent, somehow more merciless than maybe what the original intent was actually. So yeah, I just let it breathe. I just let it give its own life, you know. It just seemed to gather energy the further we got along into the songs and into the process. And well, yeah, it's done now, and we all know the results. So it's yeah, it was a fascinating journey indeed. And again, I don't think that this album. The point is, I also work with VLTIMAS, with David Winston, Pulmonaire, and we were supposed to during, well, let's say March, April 2020. I was already kind of almost like knee deep in VLTIMAS riffs and compositions, and I wanted to really. You know, we were focusing on recording the very same year, but of course we couldn't travel. And again, VLTIMAS is not a band that, you know, okay, I start every song, I create all the riffs, right? But again, we need to kind of have the band vibe, if you understand what I mean. We like to work a bit old school. So it felt wrong of me to try to kind of finalize all the songs back here in Portugal, you know, and just sending over, hey, this is going to be, you know, this is how it's going to sound like. So we decided to hold on until the borders open again. And so, yeah, I kind of needed to feel or to pour my frustration into something. And so this is how it's, well, I wouldn't say 100% that this is how it came about, but it was a huge portion of it. I mean, essentially, I also wanted to have something on my own, you know, because every band that I kind of jumped into, like, okay, Mayhem, for starters, obviously, I was not a part of founding that band. The same thing with Auron Noir. I also jumped into Auron Noir, but okay, quite early on, but still it wasn't really my band to begin with, you know. So I always felt like that I was kind of jumping into or fulfilling a role, especially in Mayhem. Obviously, it was kind of a fulfilling a role. Yeah. Then again, I wrote all the stuff. I wrote every ounce of fucking music from everything from Wolfslayer until Lord Cow. That's not the point. The point is more like having something that you establish on your own, you know. It was very important for me, and I think this is where I finally came to that realization, you know. So that's why this album and this band, I would say, albeit it's only the two of us, is very, very important for me, you know. It's something that I feel that it can grow to great strengths. I'm not scared of anything, and I'm not scared of, battling up against anything, because I know what energy lies in this band. I know what it can do. I know what mountains, you know, it can overcome in a way. The future is going to be interesting for sure.
Let me ask you a question, actually, because you're talking about jumping into bands. One of the things, and maybe this is I'm wrong, but just talking as a man, you're also, in addition to jumping into those bands, you're also a bit younger than quite a lot of the folks that you were in those bands with. Like I from my understanding, I think you're 48 years old. I know Necro Butcher is about 55. Is there something about that dynamic that had an impact on you as well, in terms of your experience of being in Mayhem and being in Au Noir and bands like that?
I mean, I was kind of I was
the young blood.
Yeah, essentially, I was, and I guess it still is, in that respect. Yeah. Now the thing is, when I joined Mayhem, it was like October, I think, sometime in October 1994. And of course, I mean, I hadn't, Mayhem already back then was obviously legendary, mostly in the underground. It became much bigger ever since. Obviously, because black metal expanded at that time, it wasn't that many people into it. It was a growing scene, but I mean, nothing compared to today. You know what I mean? I was like 17, 18, and hanging out with guys being like, 7, 8 years older than me, and of course, it made an impact as well. And I guess it caused a lot of friction too, for sure. I cannot say that it was like dancing on roses in the Mayhem period. We had a lot of distress. We had a lot of fights, especially maybe me and Necro Butcher. But I cherish all of this kind of experience, because it's essentially it's what makes us who we are, right? Yeah. And it's been a wild ride. I'm not regretting a single thing. Maybe there are moments I should regret, but I mean, I won't. What can I tell you? They're, I guess, in a good spot, and I guess they're pretty much in the same situation now. I don't know how old the new guitar players are, but it's always going to be that kind of gap, I think, in that band. And speaking of gaps, essentially, my drummer says that as well. It's like he's 15 years younger than me. So, there you have another one. Yeah. Or even more, actually. Yeah. So, whatever carries the blood flowing, whatever makes the blood flow. And yeah.
You were, one of the things I noticed about that interview that I just referenced earlier is you were, and I like it, by the way. So when I say this, I mean it, I don't mean it in a negative way at all, but you're very confident in that interview. You look like a guy who knew how to handle yourself. You kind of knew why you were there. You didn't have you weren't unnecessarily humble, if that makes sense. I guess also like just that observation. I guess that kind of was almost a prerequisite for you being able to function in that role, because of who you were also replacing.
Yeah, I mean that is true. I mean, you don't join Mayhem and take the back seats. Either you do it or you don't do it, essentially. But I obviously as well at that point, we were just, believe it or not, everybody seems to hate it now, but back in the days, literally 23 years ago, when Grand Declaration came out, it was kind of a big deal, and it got a lot of praise. That was one thing. I mean, we were pretty much full of ourselves at that point, because the album was doing extremely well, and on top of that, we didn't give a fuck either, as you say. So yeah, it was a kind of a deadly cocktail there. So I guess I was the victim of that too,
Were you always confident like that when you were younger?
I think essentially, no. I was always a very shy, very quiet guy, and I turned back again into this very quiet guy, essentially. Well, depending on what questions I've been asked or whom I'm with, whatever. But I just don't feel like that I do believe manners should go before opening your mouth, essentially. And so yeah, no, it was a cocktail of everything, it's like, and add a ton of drugs into everything as well. Again, I'm not saying I wasn't that guy, because I was. And I think the surroundings, the band, my position made me this person as well. It's like you're dealing with so many how can I put it? Not necessarily weird people, but essentially that's what it is.
You are dealing with weird people. You're dealing with
weird
people in the band. Fans who hate you because
exactly. But the thing is, as well, it's like you have to realize one thing, that I was always very proud of my own music, or my own creations, my own capabilities, my own compositions, my own riffs, and at one point as well, it's like, especially with Mayhem, it's like, I guess essentially one of the reasons why I couldn't stand it anymore was like, when you're I understand, I mean, Freezing Moon is a cool song, but some of the others aren't, but the only thing that people really want to hear is the old stuff, because they're romanticizing, you know what I mean? In my head anyway, most of the time. So it's like, it was always a burden for me, especially probably after the Chimera record. And it's like, fuck, dude, you it's like you're fighting something that is, you either have to agree with, or just go out of, in a way. That's essentially what it is. It's like, no matter what Mayhem does today, or will ever do probably in the future, is going to be measured up against something that is, in a way, well, it's beatable in terms of musicality. That's for sure. But I mean, the legacy around it, that's one thing that you cannot really beat. People are obsessed with the dead. And I think that Mayhem is a perfect example of that, really. That old heroes and old, again, I think it's a very romantic way of approaching things. And I don't know if I really understand it. It doesn't matter. I don't play in the band anymore. And, it's like, again, I wish them all the best. And I'm doing my thing to prove my strength and how I deal with things. And they do theirs. So, that's basically the end of the line.
Is that frustration one of the things that drove, you think, the direction that Orda Watkaya went into in the end? Because as you're talking about this, that record in particular just feels like such a fuck you to any convention at the time. It didn't sound like any other record that had come out at the time. Didn't sound like anything that Mayhem had ever done. It really felt like it was kind of forging its own path, and it's almost shocks you when you hear it the first time, because it's so different. And the more you've kind of been talking about how you were feeling, the more I'm kind of sensing that there was something to that frustration that you might have felt creatively, or with the way that fans were receiving the music, that may have driven you down that path creatively.
For sure. But I would also like to say, when you say that Mayhem hasn't really done anything like that previously, I would like to take that apart, actually. The thing is, Mayhem was always... before me, it was Øystein or Euronymous who created the music, at least the very vast bulk of it, with some inputs from other people. When I was in the band, I created 100% of all the music. So, and when I left, I can assume that the two guitar players now, they're writing all the music. So what is Mayhem but who's playing guitar or being the composer at the time given, and also people have been saying, yeah, but it sounds like Mayhem. No, but you know what? What Mayhem? Are you talking about Death Crush? Are you talking about Demisterius? Because this album sounds like nothing like those two releases. It sounds probably more along the lines of what I did in Mayhem. You know what I mean? And this is something that I don't think people really understand, that I wrote everything. So essentially, it not to get anybody pissed off or to ruin any illusion, But when I was in the band, I did everything musically. So whatever you're hearing was my riffs. So Was it Mayhem or was it me? Now I think it sounds a little bit different, but you know, and it definitely did before I joined the band. So I don't really care too much about this kind of thing. It's like I think it's slightly overrated, and I think that more power should be given to the people in charge at those given periods they were in the band. Now that being said, regarding Cow, I won't disagree with you, but the same thing happened actually with Grand Declaration of War as well. It was kind of a bold statement back in 1999 to record this record.
Yeah.
You know, it's like people, and like people, what the fuck is going on here? But again, as I said, it was praised. But I think Chimera album was kind of the one that was kind of a compromise because the band was in disarray. The level of creativity wasn't really peaking, you know. There was a lot of old riffs coming in there. Actually, if there's some riffs from '98 that ever bled into some of my records, it probably was Chimera. So it was more like an album that kind of needed to go out. It has a couple of really good songs, but again, it was kind of a more to almost, it sounds at least like it was almost like a crowd pleaser to me. If you understand what I mean. So again,
it was intentionally designed to please the fans rather than be an authentic expression of how you were feeling at the time.
I guess to a certain extent, but then again, I would never release anything that I'm not happy with. You know, that's probably I wanted to go that route because that's kind of how I felt. But it was also very rushed. I mean, the song "My Death," which is actually a really, really good song, was mainly improvised in the studio. So it was a lot of art by accident going on as well at the time. But I kind of agree. So as for Cow, it's just like, okay, fuck this shit, you know. It's like, and also Attila came back in. We had a completely different dynamics than what Maniac and I used to have. So it was, I think, just things got a little bit more morbid, you know, in terms of humor, in terms of everything, really. And we started to, we were kind of a fun a pair, so to speak, in terms of the overall. I mean, we kind of pushed each other to the extremes, you know. That's kind of the energy that we had on each other, if you know what I mean. That was the chemistry we had. So I remember the first show, I think one of the first shows at least with Attila back, I think it was Gates of Metal in Sweden. And Attila actually had taken the actual skin out of a pig's face and he put it on his face, like a pig's head's skin. Put it on his, And there were so many things that went wrong on that show. And I think that was actually, Mayhem was, if not directly, at least indirectly, the reason why the festival didn't continue. It was a scandal after scandal, and it was just and this was just the start. You know, we were just trying to outdo everything and just be fucked up. So I guess you can say that in the end, Orlot Cow was like, you know what, fuck this fucking bullshit. That's essentially what it was.
How did it feel to finally step away from that? Because, I mean, you know, it sounds like you had really poured your heart and soul into everything that you did when you were there. You know, and even though it was clearly the right decision for you to make at the time, was it difficult to come to that decision? And then, you know, when it was done, you know, did it feel like relief? Were you uncertain of what the future held for you after that?
Yeah, of course I was uncertain, but the point is I knew that it wasn't any future at all for me in Mayhem. I mean, it's like I didn't need it, and you know, it's like almost felt like been closing my eyes for such a long time. Okay, you know, you worship one thing. I went from extreme to try to kind of get a grip on my own life, you know, because again, as you say, it's like I put everything into my creations, as you can hear on my Ruim album. It is dedication, it's heart and soul, and it's nothing but 110% all the time, because that's how art should be, in my opinion. Because everything that I do, I feel it's a piece of I try at least to make a piece of art. So yeah, at the time, of course, it wasn't very rough decision. I just woke up one day and I just wrote Seasonal Mist first, and I was like, okay, fuck this shit, I can't do it. I think at that time I had said what I wanted to say in terms of black metal. So why keep going, for the paycheck? No, absolutely not. So, I need, first and foremost, comes the music, comes the art, comes my expression, and then hopefully the paychecks will follow, So, yeah. So it wasn't that hard, really. It was just, did I know where I was going? No, maybe not. But then again, I knew that there was nowhere to go in that band either. So,
You definitely strike me as somebody who, and I have a theory around this that I'll share with you in a second, but you definitely strike me as more of a fan and a lover of music first and foremost than somebody who necessarily identifies with a particular genre or comes from a identifies as coming from a certain scene or belonging to a certain scene. And the theory I have around that is, if I think of the folks that even as they get older, are still making music that's relevant, that's impactful, that's meaningful and sounds like it's kind of pushing the genre that they're playing in, whatever music they're making at the time, pushing that forward. It really is. It really does come from that rare group of people who it doesn't matter to them what style of music it is. They just have a connection to music and to art in the main. What are your let me pause there actually before I ask the next question. But what's your take on that? Am I bullshitting? And the only thing you listen to is the grimmest lo-fi black metal you can find.
No, the thing is, I think you're pretty much spot on. Main thing was always the music. I don't give a fuck about what kind of scene I belong. I'm not a part of this sheepish mentality at all. I do my thing, and if there's somebody who disapproves of what I'm doing, well, okay, too bad for them. I keep moving on, and I do my thing, and I follow my heart, and that's the only thing that matters in the end of the day. So yeah, but yeah, I guess that's pretty much punto final, as we say in Portugal.
So what are some of your earliest memories of music, like music you discovered by yourself, a song or band you felt connected to, and at what age did that start for you?
It started quite early, actually. I was fortunate enough to actually, I have an older sister, and I remember she was dating this heavy metal dude who played in a local heavy metal band back in the early 80s. So, or 84, 85. So he was like, probably he saw a prospect. I was like 10 years old, and he brought me to my very first show, actually, which was Motorhead in Oslo.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it was No Lights Over Europe. I think that was the tour. It was at least in 85. They just released, was it On Parole? I'm not sure what it was. With Killed by Death and all that stuff. Maybe I'm mistaken. Anyway, yeah, so ever since I remember, and he was like always leaving vinyls behind in my parents' place, so I could listen to stuff. So I kind of grew up with Motorhead, Overkill, and Ace of Spades, Judas Priest. I've seen all my favorite bands essentially before I turned 14 years old, So like Motorhead at the age of 10, Priest at the age of 11, Fuel for Life. It was a terrible release. Nevertheless, Maiden, maybe not my favorite band. Doesn't matter. I saw them on somewhere on tour, actually. Dio, Sacred Heart. I saw all of this stuff back in the days, and obviously it shaped me. It's like for as far back as I can remember, I really wanted to do heavy metal. It was something that it just called me when I was a very, very young kid. So yeah, I just kept on. I never stopped looking forward. I always had a dedication and a motivation, and well, here I am.
What was it about black metal in particular that attracted you?
I think it was everything, really. It was just the lack. I think also, I mean, death metal at that point, I was a huge death metal fan, you know. But I think we all can remember when Obituary went. I'm a huge Obituary fan, by the way, the first 3 records. But, you know, when it became very kind of socially, you know, it's the same thing with spiritual healing, really. When everything went in that direction, I kind of like, we were missing some kind of magic, you know. And I guess that from the, you know, being a teenager and growing up in the woods of Norway, it's like when we heard the first, well, obviously I was a Bathory fan since pretty much 86, 87 anyway. But when we heard, you know, the Buddhism records and even the old Rotten Christ stuff, I remember Eight's Winds demo, it was like it just triggered something in me, you know, that something that, okay, it wasn't really well played, but there was something going on there. There was something bigger, you know, something bigger behind the music. I guess that's what attracted me into black metal to begin with, that there's something more to an existence and to music. I mean, it can literally, you can emanate, or you can almost summon things through this thing, like beat feelings or you know, whatever, essentially. That it started to grow, you know. We were just kind of a handful of guys where I grew up. I grew up kind of southeast Norway, close to Sweden, actually. And we were like 5-6 guys. It was literally just us. It was listening to music out there, and you know, the local police station was very worried about us. And once in a while, they came on my parents' door to go through my room in order to find some I don't know, whatever. I don't know what they were looking for.
Occultic paraphernalia.
Something like that. Yeah. So, you know, it's like, hey, what is this? Is this the Black Book? It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? It's a dancing album. So, you know, it was fucking crazy, man. But, you know, I kind of thrived on this because I never really felt a part of anything like being placed in a line in a society. I was never that guy, you know. So I just really wanted to go my own way, and I think that's kind of proved itself very early on in my career or in my life, you know. So, yeah.
I'll tell you one thing with just backtracking to Obituary for a second. I will take it one step further. I loved what's the name, Will Demise when it came out. I was about to call it Don't Care, but no, Will Demise when it came out. I even love Back from the Dead. There's one or two of the later records I don't enjoy so much, but like Obituary to me are one of those bands that they just do what they do extremely well.
You know, I totally agree with you. And I listened to the latest record, you know, not so long ago. It's like, fuck, this is cool.
Yeah.
I haven't totally forgotten about it, but you know, it's like, again, I don't really listen that much to extreme stuff at all, actually. I listen more to 70s stuff, 70s prog and stuff like that. But when I do listen to extreme metal, it's like old classics, you know, like, so it's easy for me to, I'm a huge Cause of Death fan. I think it's a great record.
Genius record.
Yeah. And, you know, so yeah, it's good stuff, but you know, when you're playing in even more extreme bands, and you know, especially it wasn't cool to enjoy these kind of bands when you were in Norway in 1994, 1995, you know, so which is a lot of bullocks, of course, but it's like I kind of forgot about a lot of things that kind of made me happy in terms of, you know, a musical or a listening experience. And well, I still hold all of those old records dear, you know.
How much exposure did you have to the scene in Oslo and, you know, all the craziness that was going on around sort of 94 or like 93, 94?
I don't know. I mean, I came in, well, I was actually hanging around in Oslo in late 91, 92. I was hanging around, and but it was a kind of unfortunate incident, because I remember Hellhammer invited me to play, and I think it was Mortem, essentially, what it was. And this was in 92, I think. We created a few songs, actually. and we rehearsed, but we rehearsed like maybe 4 times, and it didn't really go anywhere. And then after a night of heavy drinking, some damage were done to some equipment, not musical equipment, but something that belonged to a friend of mine, and things got a bit ugly. So I just kind of decided to stay away from the whole Oslo scene for quite a few years, actually, until Helmer called me back up in '94. I think it was October '94. So I wasn't really that much. I knew what was going on, and as I told you, it's like the local police were always on my door. And
I was just about to say, were they suspecting you because of what was happening at the time?
Yeah, no, nothing like that. But more local incidents. It was like kind of a movement. It was like a nationwide thing. So it was more like local things. But I know they had me pretty much. They had me on this piece of paper that was like kind of circling the office pretty much daily. It's like, check this guy out. You got to check this guy out. something is not right. I think it was just like kind of a preventive concern from the local idiots, essentially. I can't say that I was too deeply involved until I actually got involved with Mayhem in '94, and then it was all the time, literally every weekend, and probably even more.
I think I'm just also sort of reflecting on asking you the question around what attracted you to black metal. For me, the attraction was definitely the abrasiveness of it. It has this deeper layer of, like, I still love a lot of death metal, and when you're talking about those old records, Old Morbid Angel, Deicide, Obituary, bands like that, I absolutely loved. But there was like a more visceral, more kind of emotional connection that I formed with black metal almost immediately. Like when I heard In the Nightside Eclipse, when I heard De Mysteries Dom Satanas, when I heard Nemesis Divina, those all Battles in the North, those albums, like, there's I don't know if it's like different parts of your psychology or different parts of your psyche that it affects a different way, but for me it was like it was the difference between listening to or watching a movie in stereo and watching a movie in like full Atmos, 16 speaker surround sound. That was, the latter is the experience of black metal to me on like on a visceral and a conscious level. I think that was part of what attracted me to it, which is also part of why I hated so much towards the back end of the 90s all of these black metal bands that came out, like Dismal Euphony and bands like that, where it was just a bunch of fucking nerds sitting by the riverside crying on the album covers. It was just not, it was to me the complete antithesis of what I loved about it, which is also why I continue to love the stuff that you were doing in Mayhem. And when Gorgoroth brought out Twilight of the Idols, and especially when they brought out Ad Majorem, Satana's Gloriam, like that to me was like, okay, this is black metal is back on track. So,
yeah.
But just as a side comment, but you have had the pleasure, I mean, in your life of working with, I mean, literally like the elite of the elite, a who's who of just astounding musicians across, even if we just think about it in metal, I mean, David Vincent, Flo Monnier, Alan Averill, we've obviously spoken about the Mayhem guys. Is there any one person in particular that you've worked with that you think is underappreciated, or that even that just that you look at it and you go, that is like best of the best? I mean, that guy is operates on a different level to anybody else.
It's a good question, really. I'm not the kind of guy to give up way too much flattering, but I'd say that I think David is a really, really great musician, actually. We just completed the second ULTIMAS record now.
I saw you guys were tracking that.
Yeah. No, we were done like, I don't know, 1.5 or 2 weeks ago. So yeah, he's really good. He has a lot of great ideas. He has a lot of good inputs, and I think the way he sees music, or at least he thinks about a song, is unparalleled, at least compared to people I've been working with in the past. So yeah, he has a kind of a, as long as I kind of present a riff or two, and he gets a really clear vision of how it should pan out, and I think he's really, really good at what he's doing. But you know, again, there's so many great musicians as well, as like even Nick Barker used to play with in Twilight of the Gods, and well, obviously Hellhammer, Flo Monier. I'm speaking of drummers now. I've been very fortunate to work with great drummers, which is it's just like literally alpha omega for me, because it's a bit like playing tennis. You know what I mean? It's like jamming. You know, I come up with a riff, and then the drummer, you know, joins along, and then something is created. So for me, it's essential to have a great drummer, and also back to Ruim is Cesar as well. He's very young, but he has a very deep understanding, and he's very focused. He's very dedicated, and he has the right spirit for exactly what we're doing. You know, and it's great because I mean, sometimes I come up with peculiar ideas, and you know, I have specific ideas in mind for things, and I mean, sometimes, not only sometimes, but a lot of the times I also create the drum beats, because there's, you know, it's only so many ways you can play a riff on the drums, you know. So it's like I always come up with something as an alternative, and most of the times it stick with that as well. Essentially because, as I said, I write the riffs, and therefore kind of shaping the song from there on onwards. So yeah, it's I mean I wouldn't have it any other way. It's like I need a great drummer in order to fulfill myself too. You know, it's like essentially, I'll tell you something that probably almost no one knows. I used to play drums when I was.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I did actually. I played the drums in a black metal band before I joined Mayhem. So it comes as no surprise. Well, it shouldn't come as any surprise that I had some inputs in certain drum beats for pretty much every band that I've been involved with. So yeah, it's then again, it's I guess it's a part of who I am. You know, it's like how I think, how I see the song, how I essentially want it to sound. You know.
How did you discover Cesar? Because I mean, he's you know, obviously he is in other bands. Thagirion is his other active band that he's in, but I mean they reasonably, you know, in terms of profile, you know, not massively high profile, but he is absolutely sensational. And I mean he's the way that his style fits in with what you've done on Ruim is, I mean, stunning.
So the thing is, this is kind of strange, really. I'm not sure how I can explain it to you, but it's like when I wanted to look for a drummer, I immediately asked a friend of mine in Paris. I was kind of determined to get a kind of a French vibe into this thing. I didn't want any, you know, typical true Norwegian black metal drummer, because for me, I don't know, I don't really connect that much with that kind of style, at least not these days. I wanted something else. I wanted something more, a little bit more, maybe let's say fucked up, and that's why I kind of looked to France, because of the history of some other bands, and you know, they have a different, not only input, but also different inspiration, different way of dealing with things, you know, musically. So I was kind of determined to get a French drummer for some reason, or for that specific reason. So I contacted my friend in Paris, and he said, oh, he had a couple of options. And then he mentioned that, essentially this was Chuck from Thagirion. So he said that, well, my drummer is amazing. You should check him out. And he gave me some YouTube links or whatever. And I was like, okay, so says that I already done some Decibel Omega cover uploads, you know, on his page, on his YouTube channel. So it's like, shit, this guy knows his stuff. So yeah, I asked for his number. And we had an hour talk, and I explained my stuff, and he was like super eager to join. And I literally flew over to Lyon. He picked me up, and we had our first session over like 5-6 days. and what can I tell you? I mean, we instantly connected, you know. So it's it was actually really call it fate. I almost tend to believe that, because looking back now, or even listening to some of the stuff, it's like it's a perfect fit for my stuff. You know, it's like this is exactly how I wanted it in terms of drumming. So yeah, something came in and gave me the right drummer. So
he definitely
amazing.
plays with a lot of feel, and he's got a very expressive style of playing. And again, those are absolutely my favorite types of drummers too. I don't like drummers that have that very kind of mechanical, like if they're blasting, you know, all you hear is just a blast, and it may as well be, you know, a drum kit from hell that's been programmed or something like that.
But you know,
I like drummers that have that flair where, you know, they it feels like they're just as expressive as the guitarist is. They're just doing that behind the drum kit rather than, you know, playing a guitar.
That's essentially what it is. I mean, it's like if you listen to modern bands now, you listen that you hear that the snare is, even though it's like 265 BPM, the snare is constant in level. What is that? That's trickery. No one does that. You know what I mean? So this is all bullshit. I mean, it's like we're listening with, I don't know, we've gotten used to so many fucking weird things in this day and age. And this is something I really want to steer clear of. I want my music to be, I want it to be played, you know what I mean? I don't want it to be programmed. No, it's like, hey, it's lacking some bass drums on that song. Hey, technician, can you just, you know, add them to the grid? You know, this stuff for me doesn't work. It's either played or it's not coming out, you know? Because, I mean, that's where the X factor lies. That's where all the, I think that's what makes a different dimension to music. It's the humanity of it. You know?
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, and it's also what makes it more memorable, right? If every single thing, every record that's played absolutely note perfect, and you know, there's been a lot of studio trickery to clean up stuff and things like that. It lacks personality. Whereas, you know, let's take an album like Battles in the North. I've spoken about it on the podcast a lot. I mean, there's so many mistakes left on that record, but that's part of the charm of the album. You know, Definitely. The first Deicide record littered with mistakes from start to finish. I mean, Sacrificial Suicide, like he's actually missing his snare drum during parts of the solo, but that's because he's so pissed off and incensed. Like in your mind, you're seeing this as like this dude is going so crazy on his drums. He doesn't even care if he's fucking, you know, hitting the right beats anymore or not. And that's what makes it great.
Exactly. It's intention that makes the music, and I was always about that, you know, and especially now with this kind of let's call it ferocious kind of music, you know, which it is essentially. We need to shine. We need to bring out something inside of us, you know. We need to bring out that kind of beast, you know. And I think that's essentially what makes these albums or some albums really, really great, because they managed, you know.
So I know VLTIMAS obviously is going to have a new record coming out. Have you got anything else on the boil that you're able to talk about?
Well, yeah. Well, as I told you, I just essentially just got home from the studio. We recorded. We were 1 month in the studio in the northern Portugal at Arda Recorders in the Porto, finalizing the VLTIMAS record. So yeah, we're just waiting for. Well, basically to hear the mixes, and you know, if we have to add something, I'm in close proximity, you know, so it's not a big deal for me. So yeah, it's we're essentially just trying to finalize that. Other than that, I have a Portuguese doom rock record that I'm about to record. It's a band called Earth Electric. The first record was a bit more rock, but now we're gone into the kind of heavier, some kind of I wouldn't say My Dying Bride, but it goes way.
You're going to turn the voltage up just a little bit.
It's going to be probably more closer to. It's going to be. I'm going to have my growl vocals there as well, so it's probably closer to some classic Paradise Lost, the My Dying Bride stuff, you know. But of course, not replicating anything. I do my own stuff always. At least try to. So that's going to be a very, very interesting record. It's being released on Season East sometime next year as well. And then I guess after that, just start a new cycle. I have already written 2 songs for the next Ruim album as well. So that will be my focus starting early next year, I guess, and then essentially in 2025, after the release of the second record, we will eventually go live as well. So that's.
I was just about to ask you, would you ever take the project live?
Yeah. So this is the thing. This is the idea that I didn't want to go live with the first record. I would like to have some more songs under my belt. Yeah, I'm waiting until the second record is done, and if all goes according to plan, I will enter the studio sometime mid next year. I already have a bunch of stuff, but now with the new VLTIMAS album coming as well, it's going to be a lot of touring. It's going to be a lot of shows, so it's going to be a busy year. But I like being busy, so it's just a challenge finding time for everything.
Yeah. Let me ask you actually one question. Do you prefer the creative aspect of what you do, or are you somebody who kind of lives for the experience of playing live?
Oh, I'm complete. You know what? If I could, I'll answer the short version first. It's like, yeah, I'm definitely a creative person, and I don't mind spending my time just creating. Essentially, I always saw. It's a kind of a bit unfair to say that I saw live shows as a necessary evil, but it's closer to that. If I could just compose and be in the studio and do my audio art, I think that would be preferable. But once in a while, I'll enjoy going on stage. It depends on the traveling group. It depends on the mood of everybody. But yeah, I'm more of a creative guy, if I'm going to be totally honest with you.
Mm. And final question: what keeps those creative fires burning? Because again, as folks get older, and we won't name names, but I'm sure you could think of several examples in your head. But you get to that place where, with a lot of people in metal that I see, you can hear they're doing it because it's what's expected of them. B, it's what keeps the bills paid and the lights on. And that authentic expression that we were talking about earlier that seems to go away. Clearly, that's not the case with you. But I do, where I have some degree of empathy for those folks. I understand that it's difficult to keep that passion going if it's not something that comes naturally to you. So where do you think, like, where does that kind of constant drive, that constant energy come from when it comes to you?
So it's a very good question. I just think that I always come out of every recording session thinking I can do way better. I think it's kind of I chase perfection somehow. When I reach that, this probably will be the end of the road. I haven't reached it yet.
Yeah.
Hence me continuing. So I don't know. It's very, very. It's a good question. It's a tough question to answer. It's just that I wake up every morning and this is what comes to mind. It's like I was born here for a reason. It's like it's a huge purpose in my existence on this planet, if you will. And that's what I keep thriving on. It's hard to explain, but that's how I feel.
Well, it makes all the sense in the world. Like I said, you just the way you explained it right there, because it really does come out in your music. And I'm definitely very, very excited about wherever Ruim goes next. Likewise, anything else that you make. But I want to say thank you so much for your time. I've really, really appreciated it, and I've really had fun talking to you. And hopefully we meet up with each other again at some point down the road.
Awesome, man. Thank you very much.
All right, brother. Take care.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. Black Royal Spiritism, the title track of the fantastic debut record by Ruim, featuring my guest this week, Rune Eriksen, aka Blasphemer. Massive thank you to him for his time. And my friends, if you have not checked out that Ruim album yet, I will tell you, not only is it hands down my #1 contender for the best album of 2023, but I'm also willing to wager that you probably stumbled onto this podcast by mistake. It is absolutely sensational. Make sure that you check out their Bandcamp. I'll post the link in the description to the podcast. If you buy yourself anything there, let Rune know that it was old Jackson at Into the Necrosphere that sent you. And I must be honest, I think that conversation probably rockets its way up to one of my favorites that I've ever done on the show. So I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did, and hopefully I will get him back on the podcast at some point in the not too distant future. Now, friends, it seems as though this is going to be a banner year for Norwegian black metal, because not only are we talking about Ruim, but Ekrom have put out a sensational debut record called Uten N, Formildelse. And I know that I have absolutely butchered the title of that record, but I'm sure you guys can figure it out. The record is available right now on Edged Circle Productions. If you go back to the conversation I had with Svartalv, I think the first one where he and I spoke, he actually mentioned this band. It is a band who features Tex Terror of Nocturnal Breed on drums, as well as a gentleman who goes by the name of Caron. And some of you that are students of the game will recognize the name Caron as the bass player on Covenant's In Times Before the Light album that came out in 1995. Some Covenant fans may be tempted to refer to that particular record's title as In Times Before Covenant Turned into a Steaming Bowl of Wank. I'm not one of those people. I actually do like Nexus Polaris, which was the album they put out after that. But yeah, I mean, this was definitely, in my view, the best Covenant record. It had a much truer Norwegian black metal sound, and unsurprisingly, Ekram follows a very, very similar path. There are 8 tracks on here. They are all beautifully crafted. They really are a love letter to second wave Norwegian black metal, particularly the second wave Norwegian black metal that was coming out in sort of 1993 to late 1995, back before the symphonic stuff, back when atmosphere really was created through keyboards and through, you know, just fucking badass riffing. And the great thing about it is these songs are wrapped in a modern day production which sounds at once crusty and gritty, but, you know, equally retains a huge amount of impact. So it has a modern feel to it, but definitely an old school aesthetic, and it really, really works. I mean, this may be the band's debut record, but it sounds like they've been going at it for years. Unsurprising, given that these gentlemen have been in and around the black metal scene for, I would imagine, most of their lives. But fantastic stuff, and you're going to find out why, in case you haven't heard it yet, in just a second, as I thrill you with a track off of the new Ekram record. This is Abyss of Eternity. That was Abyss of Eternity by Ekrom off of their fantastic debut record, Uten N, Formildelse. Once again, my apologies to every single person from Norway for the way in which I have savaged their native tongue. But the sentiment remains. It is a sensational record. It's available right now on Edged Circle Productions. I do believe it may even meet, possibly even exceed the criteria for the much vaunted top-notch accolade. Really, really good stuff. Now, my friends, if you think that Jeremy Corbyn is a clever man, it's time for you to get to stepping, because this is my weekly news rant. As always, we kick off on metalstorm.net, the best metal news website going, and our very first headline, MARDUK announces Memento Mori full-length. It says here, MARDUK proudly reveals in connection with their new studio release, Memento Mori, it will land in stores on September the 1st, 2023 via Century Media Records. Producer Magnus Anderson took over the recording, mixing and mastering process. To taste a first bit of it, give a listen to the first single called Blood of the Funeral. I have been very, very excited about this. Now, let's set the scene though, because I have spoken about it previously, but I think just to summarize for those of you with short attention spans, Victoria, the previous MARDUK record, was not up to par in my opinion. I think that it had one exceptionally good song, the last track, Silent Night, a couple of other decent songs smattered in between, but it was not of the same quality as, in my opinion, the greatest era in the MARDUK discography, which is Romans 5:12, Wormwood, and Serpent Sermon. Frontschwein is a decent record. It's not as good as Serpent Sermon, not nearly as experimental, not nearly as interesting. It does have some very, very good songs. But I would say the issue that I always had with Victoria is that it sounded like B-roll from the Frontschwein sessions, and they kind of put it together and did an album, which I mean, I understand. These guys tour a lot, so, you know, I don't know how much time they get to do actual writing. You know, and equally, we all know at the time, Mortus, the great Mortus, was busy doing a Funeral Mist record. So it may well be that whatever creative contributions he would typically have provided to the band was being held aside for the Funeral Mist stuff. But without further ado, let's hear what the MARDUK men have gotten up to with Blood of the Funeral. Instant Funeral Mist vibes, which is an instant winner as far as I'm concerned. Mortus is sounding as pissed off as ever. I mean, there is no doubt that this man, in my opinion, is one of the absolute best black metal vocalists going today. Like, if you had to do a top 5 black metal vocalist list, a Mount Rushmore of the greatest men to ever shred their vocal cords for Satan, he is 100% on that list. There's no doubt about it. He sounds so unbelievably unique, so aggressive. He can do so much with his voice, and it is just on full display there. The riffing, I absolutely love. The opening bit of that song reminds me a lot of Funeral Mist. It also reminds me a little bit of Wormwood, but it does have a bit of a Panzer Division MARDUK vibe to it as well. So you've got the intensity of Panzer Division MARDUK, but with you know, some of the darkness and that kind of twisted element that you know, was on Wormwood and was on Funeral Mist, or has been on all of the Funeral Mist records, I should say. And by the way, just as a side note, before we get back into it, I believe that I'm not the biggest fan of bands re-recording records, but if ever a record would benefit from being re-recorded, it's Panzer Division MARDUK. The original is excellent, but when you hear how those songs sound live with Mortius on vocals, it's not comparable to what Legion did. I was never a fan of Legion. I always liked MARDUK, despite him, not because of him, or he certainly didn't enhance my enjoyment of MARDUK at all. So I do think if ever a band was going to do a re-recording of a record, I think Panzer Division MARDUK with Mortius on vocals, slightly harsher production than the Abyss Studios production that it had, I think would be fucking fantastic. But let us get back to this song. If you go back to the conversation I had with Rune, and we were talking about, having that or retaining that character in black metal, that essential character, you really hear it done so well there. I'd be curious to know how those drums were recorded, but they definitely sound very organic to me. And, even though this is, essentially just blasting from start to finish, it never feels boring. It's never blasting that sounds monotonous, mechanical. There's something quite organic, I feel, in how the song sounds. And, in terms of just severity and sheer aggression, I mean, these guys have always, especially with Mortius in the band, have always set the standard for violence when it comes to black metal, and there is no deviation from that year. I mean, the bar has been. I think actually these guys are raising the bar once again, at least as far as that's concerned. Bands like Ruim, Altari, they'll take the atmospheric side of black metal and take that to the next level. But if you are after, as Morgan himself has described it, a fist in the face of God, there is no better band than MARDUK. I'm going to jump to minute 4. This is a 5-minute song, so I'm just curious to hear what we... actually, let's make it 3 minutes 30 seconds. I'm just curious to hear where the song goes to from where we are at currently. Those keyboards, fucking fantastic. I mean, obviously, we're still in, full-blown black metal battalion mode. I would actually say those keyboards just make it sound even better. Like when I was talking about Ekrom earlier, one of the things that they do so well is when they use keyboards, it's very sparing. And when they do use it, it really has impact because it's not omnipresent. It's not always there. Same deal here. This is such a simple... It's such a simple addition, but it does so much for the song. That is more than top notch. That is just absolutely fantastic. I've so looked forward to MARDUK doing a a true return to form, a true, proper comeback record. And I had hoped that this was going to be the one, or the album that does it. And I think that they've absolutely met the brief, so to say. This is fucking fantastic. I can't wait for this album to come out. And before anybody asks, yes, I am going to do my absolute level best to get Morgan on the show. They are with Century Media Records, which, if I must be completely honest with you guys, is a bit tricky to get people on from. And that is for reasons that probably, for pragmatism's sake, I'm not going to repeat right now, but let me say this: the North American folk, when it comes to Century Media, are a bit easier to deal with. So too the continental European folk. It's the UK that has sometimes proven challenging. But I am going to do everything that I can to get Morgan on the podcast. I think that this album is going to be a top 10 contender for 2023 without a shadow of a doubt. Just on the topic of guests, I spoke to you guys last week and said Katie Rosario was meant to be on this week's show. We actually do have an episode in the can, but straight after we recorded what was a very fun, enjoyable 2-hour conversation, there were quite a lot of things that happened, and I was pondering it for a few days, and I dropped her a line and I said, listen, when you're on the show, people expect spicy conversation. They expect us to, talk about things that are, a little bit controversial, certainly outside the norm of the usual, metal interview. And I said, maybe we need to do a do-over. Which she was down with. Now, some of those spicy things include the whole, Peter Hotez, Joe Rogan blow up, as well as all of the furor around Till Lindemann. I mean, some of you guys will have seen that situation has just gotten so out of hand, in my view. It is just absolutely fucking insane. There was a guy, a beta male, who wrote an article for a magazine or a website called the Foreign Spectator or the Foreign Delegate or some shit, where he says Rammstein is the new face of the far right in Germany. It's like, they've been a band for 30 years, you fucking bozo. But anyway, so there's a lot that she and I needed to discuss. So I'm not going to dwell on it too much on this installment of the News Rant. But we are scheduled to speak this coming Thursday, I think. So hopefully next week's episode will be the definitive Katie and Jackie redux. And I think it's going to be her 4th time on the show too. So, but anyway, just wanted to clarify that. We move on, folks. Torture Squad have inked a deal with Time to Kill Records. Blackening are streaming a new track online. It says here, Thrashers, Blackening, offer in listening a brand new single, Greed and Lies. The latter is part of the band's oncoming full-length effort, Awakening Rage, due out on July the 28th via Black Lion Records. Never heard of Blackening before. Do like some of the bands that Black Lion Records have been signing. So let's hear whether Greed and Lies has what it takes to be featured on the podcast again at some point in the future. This is pretty damn good. I was just having a quick gander on Metal Archive. So Blackening have been around for, it seems like just over a decade. This is going to be their 3rd album, and they hail from Sao Paulo, Brazil. But yeah, I like that. It had a bit of a haunted vibe to it, but with enough personality for them to sound quite distinct. Interesting visuals on the video as well for those watching this on YouTube, cutting rather close to the bone, given everything that's going on in France right now. And I do want to say to all of the Into the Necrosphere listeners in France, I hope that you are staying out of harm's way. I hope that you and yours are safe. I mean, it's a pretty terrible thing that we're seeing unfold there. Really, really disturbing images. And it's not going to help me, making any proclamations or comments on it. All that I will say is, if I could give anybody any advice, if you are living inside of a big city and it's feasible for you to do so, get out as soon as you possibly can. Go live in the countryside, or at least move to a smaller town, because I feel like what we're seeing in France is the tip of the iceberg, folks. I think we're going to see more of this happening in bigger cities all over Europe, certainly in the UK, and I, for one, don't want any part of it. I've never been a fan of rioting, and I believe everybody has the right to protest, but when it turns to you smashing down buildings, burning down stores, and generally just being a fucking scumbag and an opportunist, that to me is not right. Now, again, what's going on in France is a lot more than just people being opportunists. I know that, but the outcome for the average person is that, as I said, in my view, you should not be living in a big city if you can help it. But let's get back to Greed and Lies.
The light to the blind. This smoke screams from defeated. And they never leave everything there.
I now know what that riff reminds me of as well, which is potentially why I like it so much. Stamping Ground. And you guys will remember I had Ian from Stamping Ground on the show many moons ago. What a fucking sensational band, and if you have not checked out their stuff, you really ought to do yourself a favor and do so. Those that grew up in the UK metal scene almost certainly would have seen them play live. They were live one of the most aggressive, insane, intense bands I've ever seen in my life. But yeah, I like this very much. This is getting a thumbs up from me, and I'm going to look forward to hearing the rest of that record. But just as we're scrolling on looking for the next the next single to listen to, let me just expand very quickly on the point that I made earlier. I said that I think this is the tip of the iceberg. From my perspective, it's obvious that there's more trouble coming. You can get a sense of it just by looking at social media, the degree of resentment and the degree of loathing and hatred that people, generally speaking, have for each other. Whether it's political differences, whether it's differences around gender ideology, whether it's differences around a great multitude of things, people seem to very much be at each other's throats. And all it takes is a catalyst to, ignite the spark and for shit to start going down. Which again, like I said, is why we need to not be around that if we can possibly help it. All right, next up, Till the Dirt, Sign with Nuclear Blast, debut on the way. Now, those of you that have checked out both of the appearances that Kelly Schaefer of Atheist made on the podcast, you'll know that Till the Dirt is a band that we played about 2, I think maybe even 3 years ago on the podcast. I've had this record for ages. Awesome news that it's been signed by Nuclear Blast. I mean, I remember talking to him when he first sent this to me, and I did say to him, I cannot fucking understand how people aren't picking this up, because this is top tier modern metal without falling into the trappings of some of the stuff that the young bloods fall into. Some of it is just for me at least, it's just the trite Iron Maiden riffing, the singing, the stuff that breaks down from that detracts from the severity of the music. But for me, Till the Dirt, great band, great record, and as I said, fucking fantastic news that it's being signed by Nuclear Blast of all labels. We are going to listen to the song anyway, just for those of you guys that haven't heard it yet. And when I played it on the podcast, there were a couple of people that said, I don't like it. Don't expect Kelly, of all people, to do a atheist redux if it's not going to be under the name Atheist, right? So I'm going to have him on the show as well to talk about the album again in more detail, and what a blast always catching up with him. So that'll happen in the next couple of weeks. But let's get to the article. It says here, Till the Dirt, an American tech death metal band featuring 3 atheist members among others. I don't really think they're tech death. I think that's a very misplaced description. I think it's modern metal. But anyway, they've joined forces with Nuclear Blast and at the same time announced the release of their debut full-length entitled Outside the Spiral. It will be set free on August the 25th, 2023. For a preview, you can now check out the first single title track from the accompanying lyric video. So I don't know about you guys, but I hear shades of Strapping Young Lad on here. I hear, I hear whiffs of Nevermore. I do hear a bit of death metal. I maybe even hear a bit of Atheist in here. But I mean, this to me is just, a bunch of guys who have been around for a while, still at the top of their game, making really, really good extreme metal. I think it's fantastic. It says here, the band leader, Kelly Schaefer, commented on the signing to Nuclear Blast. As an extreme metal artist, there is no better place to land than Nuclear Blast. A staff that is second to none, and as a label, I feel they share the same passion I have for metal music. So it's a true honor to release this record to the world on the best metal label on the planet. He went on to say, my writing went into overdrive during lockdown, and I was writing and recording a new song almost daily, as well as playing on the demos. I was inviting friends for solos and guest spots, one being Jeff Loomis of Arch Enemy and Nevermore, and also John Longstreth of Origin. Scott Burns really helped me pull it all in because we had so many songs to work with and had to narrow to 11. It's one of the most prolific moments in my career, and I'm proud to say that there is zero filler on this record. I couldn't be more proud of it. I believe one of the folks that played on this record is also Steve DiGiorgio, who is, in my view, one of the best bass players of all time. But anyways, let's get back to it. Yeah, thumbs up from me. I get that if people are, wanting to hear Atheist too, they're maybe not going to feel this quite as much. But I think it's a great record. As I said, I've heard the whole thing, and if you like it and you like whatever Kelly does, he's going to be back on the show again very soon as well. I am actually getting to a point where the schedule is filled up now to such a degree. I know more or less what the rest of this month is going to look like. Then at the end of July, of course, there's Reaper Fest. For those of you guys that don't know yet, Reaper Fest takes place at the Hairy Dog in Derby on the 28th and the 29th of July. It will feature headlining performances by the likes of Ultha, the Ruins of Beverast. It will also feature a performance by the Great Heathen Deity, and I will be interviewing hopefully all of those bands in person. I'm also going to record an interview in person with Cheyenne. At least that's what the plan is right now. So most of August is going to be in persons, which is going to be very cool too. But, I've said this many times before, none of this growth would have been possible had it not been for the Legion. So a huge thank you from my side for the continued support that I get every single week. There are constantly people that are sending me, messages saying how much the show means to them, and that just warms the cockles of my heart. And as I've said to you guys many times before, it is more than enough motivation to keep me going and to make sure that week in and week out I'm putting out the best possible episode and the best possible content for you guys that I can. Okay, Hex Vessel are next. They have launched a Matt Cost McCurney directed music video for the newly streaming track called Ring. The latter will appear on the group's upcoming 6th album, Polar Veil, scheduled for the September the 22nd, 2023 release via Svart Records. I fucking loved that first single that they put out. I can't even remember which one it was. I think it was Older Than the Gods, but it was brilliant. And I will also say, once again, I think Hex Vessel is a fantastic name for a band. Now, let's hear whether Ring can cut the mustard also. For a minute there, I actually almost forgot that I was busy recording this, and I was about to just listen through the song end to end. Fantastic. I mean, it is so unique, so different to so much stuff that we hear. It's got a, at its core, it's got a black metal vibe to it. But it kind of, one thing I was thinking about as I was listening to this, it kind of seems to play in the same ballpark as Johnny the Boy, in which, by which I mean it's throwing a huge amount of different influences into, a pretty blackened, dark canon of music, and what comes out at the other end is just sensational. I mean, that I love that. I cannot wait to hear the rest of this record. Also, dynamite idea for a tour. Galsveerd headlining, support bands Hex Vessel and Johnny the Boy. That's going to be a fucking tour that would absolutely rip your face off, but also be weird enough for people that are into that sort of thing. And as a matter of fact, actually, now I mention it, this is not spiritually at least, is not a million miles away from Goldsfield in that it's black metal with I've yet to hear a single scream. You know, like I kind of jokingly, but not so jokingly, have said very many times before, Gol is the only guy that can produce a black metal record without a single scream. I may be wrong. Hex Vessel may have proven me wrong, but let's get back to it. A million out of 10. I fucking love this. Absolutely fucking love it. We're on an absolute roll today as far as new music is concerned, folks. Let's go on to the next one. Incantation are set to release their next full length in August. These are some busy men. I mean, they definitely don't sit back on their laurels. It says here, death metal veterans Incantation are ready to release their 13th studio album titled Unholy Deification on August the 25th, 2023 via Relapse Records. Along with this announcement and unveiled details, the four-piece have also premiered the first and lead single, Concordat the Pact 1. Frontman and founder John McKenty stated, I'm not interested in playing it safe. I think other people feel that there are limits to what we do. However, I don't see it that way. If it feels right, then it's Incantation. The songs we write are an honest expression of ourselves. When people hear the new album, I hope they will think, why are these guys so pissed off? Rage gives focus, which is why this album turned out the way it did. I am looking forward to it, guys, and we're going to find out whether it sounds as pissed off as John thinks right now. John sounds like he has been gargling whiskey every single day for however long he's been around for. I would imagine he's in his early 50s, if I'm not mistaken. Their first album came out back in '92, so yeah, he's been around for a while. But his vocals sound or show no sign of getting in any way weak or worn out. He sounds like a badass. I love the riff. I love the production. And for me, when this song really hits its straps is when it starts getting, when the pace starts getting picked up. When that kind of mid-tempo groove that they briefly have rolls in, magic. Absolute fucking magic. So yeah, good stuff from the Incantation lads so far.
The
That is top notch, my friends. It is old school without it sounding like they're trying to be old school. The impact, the thud of every single instrument sounds fucking great. Yeah, really, really, really good stuff, and glad to hear that these guys are carrying on without losing a step. I mean, I've said it so many times before. I have so much admiration for people that have been in the game for a long time and are still able to put out music that not only sounds inspired, but that sounds relevant. And I think Incantation can count themselves in that rare group of people. Obviously, we know Immolation, put out a sensational record. I think the Obituary guys, it definitely feels like there's some fresh inspiration there. But there are many, many bands that have been around for a long time that just, for whatever reason, at some point, it's like the magic, the thrill just isn't there for them anymore, and you can hear that on the record. Incantation is the exact opposite, and that is great. All right, I was told to check out this band, As in Hell. It is a newly formed band by one of the gentlemen from Volbeat. Now, normally I would sooner take a trip to the dentist and request to not have any sort of numbing cream or Novocaine injected before they begin the root canal than listen to Volbeat. But I have it on good authority that this is actually pretty good. So it says here, Denmark's As in Hell is the newly formed old-school death metal band featuring Volbeat's Michael Paulson on guitars, Mark Grew of Insidious Disease and Morgoth on vocals, and Morten Toft Hansen of Raunchy on drums. Together, they are set to release their debut album, Impy Horror, on September the 29th via Metal Blade Records. To taste a first piece of the new music output, give a spin to the Fall of the Loyal Warrior single. It's all right, this, but I think recency bias might be getting in the way just a little bit. After a song as great as that Incantation track, any other old school death metal band, no matter who they are, was going to have a tough time topping that. This sounds okay. The drumming to me sounds a little bit sterile. I mentioned before about that organic drumming that I like. This sounds very clean, very slick. Nothing on here sounds bad, but nothing is blowing me away. And actually, frankly, the thing I'm thinking of most is I need to play you guys one of my favorite Morgoth songs. Very much a hidden gem as far as I'm concerned. So they put out a record back in, I think, 1996 called Feel Sorry for the Fanatic. And not very well received because it sounded like they were trying to be more like Prong than, the Morgoth that had released Odium. But that being said, there are some gems on that record, in my opinion, especially the one I'm about to play right now. So just to give you guys some motivation to go and revisit this record, because I think it's well worth doing, I'll give you the first minute or so of Graceland by Morgoth. Brilliant stuff there. I said Prong. It actually sounds probably a little bit more like Killing Joke, but yeah, either way, fucking great. Prong is superb, and Killing Joke, fantastic. So make sure you go back and listen to that record if that's your kind of vibe. I mean, if you're after death metal, then maybe not so much. Okay, End Rain, Chaos Masked as Order single premieres. Chaos Masked as Order featuring Dylan Walker of Full of Hell and Edward Carr Spell. The legendary Pink Dots is the new single from End Rain's forthcoming debut album, The Way of All Flesh is Decay. The latter drops July 14th on Relapse Records. Let's hear what this is about. Very competently played, very enjoyable crossover thrash by End Rain. I would say it actually sounds more like Ringworm to me than the last Ringworm single sounded to me. So, if that's your kind of music, I think you'd probably be in your element with this. Aggressive, it's pretty catchy. Nothing particularly remarkable or unique, but you don't always need that. I like it. I think it's very good. You guys get the idea. As I said, I think it's pretty decent. Let's check out one or two more. And then, as a matter of fact, one more. And then we're going to head over to not the Democrats' Guide to Rock Music, because frankly, I'm pretty sick and tired of Blabbermouth. Blabbermouth to me has just basically become a PR mouthpiece for Dave Mustaine to complain every single day about how he was unfairly booted out of Metallica, and he was the reason Metallica is, got as big as they did, and he's the best guitar player on earth, and he's Jitkin Doe is the most deadly. And then, you've got fucking Dave Ellefson every other day talking about, being booted out of Megadeth. He has basically become the Dave Mustaine equivalent of, getting kicked out of Megadeth. He's the Dave Mustaine equivalent of that. And and the rest of it, I mean, most of the stuff that they have on there is fucking bullshit. It's politically colored trash written by somebody who is a fucking idiot, in my opinion. So anyway, Celeste are putting out a new EP. It says here they have got a new EP coming out in November. They have released a video for Isse Vida Lentiment. Again, I have butchered the French language by saying that, but that's just one of those things. I wish I could speak French, but I cannot. It's due out on the 17th of November through Nuclear Blast Records. It's going to be on their new EP, Epilogues. I thought always that the previous Celeste record was fantastic, and I think that it may have been given not short shrift, but maybe not the attention that it deserves on the best of lists of the year, including my own, because of the fact that it came out so early in the year. And it came out, if memory serves me correctly, on the same day as the last Immolation record. That's always tough, because when there's like a massive album that comes out, then if you release your record on the same day, you always run the risk of getting lost in the mix just a little bit. But either way, if you've not listened to that Celeste record, I strongly recommend that you do. We are going to hear the single right now and hear whether or not these folks are, whether they still have it. I think proving that French black metal is very much alive and well. Yeah, I like it. Very similar vibe to Assassins. I think it's Assassins or Assassin, the album they put out last year. But very, very cool. They're kind of playing the same style of black metal as a band like Veraduit. And I think they've actually gone on tour with Veraduit a couple of times as well, unsurprisingly. But yeah, this is very cool stuff. So I said I don't want to go on to Blabbermouth. We're going to go check out We Are the Pit, because at the very least it seems like there's an attempt to do something a little bit more interesting than the fucking shite that they have on Blabbermouth. So we've got heavy metal news headlines. The first headline: watch this 9-year-old absolutely destroy Pantera's domination. We've got a very determined looking little girl, at least it looks like a little girl, who's doing a cover of Domination. So it says, yeah, this video is somehow sick and also adorable at the same time. Watch this 9-year-old singer and her kid band absolutely destroy Domination by Pantera, surrounded by kitten and puppy posters. All right, well, we'll hear if this is any good. I don't know what this band's name is. We'll check out the rest of the article in a second, but let's hear what they sound like.
Left to destroy and to use destroy your eyes.
I don't want to be mean. I don't necessarily think she's destroying the cover. I mean, they like destroying. And I guess it depends on what you mean by the word destroy. Is it destroying it in the literal sense, or is it destroying it in the street slang sense? I would say it's maybe more the former, but I will give it to her. there is no fucking chance I would have sounded any better at the age of 9. The fact she's got the guts to stand up there and do that, everybody has to start somewhere. And I bet you if she carries on like that, she's going to have a very bright future ahead of her. So the band doesn't sound too bad either. All seem like pretty young cats, with the exception of the drummer. That seems like maybe that's their older brother, but not bad. Corey Taylor, Stone Sour's future uncertain due to creative hindrances. Oh no, I'm desperately unhappy about that. I'm very surprised that we've yet to see Corey Taylor give his expert opinion on what's happening in France. But I'm pretty sure we will soon get to enjoy both his warbling about it, as well as a couple of really thought-provoking Randy Blythe blog posts where they really set the world to rights in the most informed manner possible. By which I mean they informed themselves entirely with MSNBC's bullshit and the writings of Noam Chomsky. Because if you ever want to identify a person who is a clueless fuckface, wait for the second that they quote that imbecile. Geezer Butler says he had to get used to Black Sabbath being called heavy metal. The 10 worst album covers of all time. Okay, let's check this out. So first up, they've got Iron Maiden Dance of Death. Then they got Pantera's Metal Magic. I mean, that I can get. It is pretty terrible. It looks like it was drawn by that same 9-year-old that just did the cover. Artillery Terror Squad. That looks like a Chinese Christmas card. Fucking atrocious. Wolf, the self-titled record Wolf. Also another what looks like a childish drawing. There seems to be a common theme going through some of these selections. Raven, The Pack is Back. Holy Jesus, that's bad. Typo Negative, The Origin of the Feces. If I have to see Peter Steele's gaping asshole, you have to see Peter Steele's gaping asshole. But what a record, though. Halloween Chameleon, which is basically just a bunch of, paint stripes. Scorpions, Animal Magnetism, Therion, Telly. I don't think Telly is that bad, the album cover. Riot, Narita. Fuck me. I mean, they're not joking around. These are some very, very shitty album covers. As I said, I think maybe the Therion album cover, you need to cut them a little bit of slack on that. And that was a decent record. Okay, well, next up we've got the guy that knocked Glenn Danzig out in one punch wrote a book about it. Says here, after one of Glenn Danzig's solo shows in the early 2000s, one of the opening bands, Northside Kings, were none too pleased with having to go on after Danzig, which led to him and Northside Kings guitar player Danny Marianino getting into some fisticuffs backstage. Marianino had said the show fell behind due to the promoter being disorganized. Glenn refused to push his time back, and we, along with 3 other bands, were forced to play after him on the condition that he announced the other bands. He didn't announce the band and closed the show, so we all got fucked over. I went to talk to him. He started yelling. So did I. Then he put his hands on me. He pushed me into a wall and yelled, "Fuck you, motherfucker," and I defended myself. Though Danzig maintains that he didn't lay a finger on him, video evidence tells a bit of a different story. And that video evidence we have right here, friends. I do remember this very, very well, but for completion's sake, we will revisit the epic bout between Danny and Glenn.
We went on exactly. I understand that, but can we push it back a little bit? Why can't you go on after us? Because they turned the fucking lights on it. They had a fucking play shot. It took 6 hours. Fuck you, motherfucker.
Yeah, I've got to say, I love Glenn, but he had that coming to him. If a guy, I don't give a shit who it is, if a guy pushes me like that when I'm having, what at least at the time, at the point there sounds like a reasonably civil conversation, if you push me like that, you're getting smacked. No two ways about it. So I love Glenn. You guys know I'm a massive, massive Glenn Danzig fan. But whether it was Glenn Danzig or fucking anyone who's anyone, if they push you like that, you've been punked, and as a man, I'm afraid it's just the law of nature. It is time to stand up for yourself, or wind up looking like a bitch. And Danny most definitely did not look like a bitch, because he floored old man Glenn with that shot. We watched the the replay once again. I mean, yeah, that is right on the button. Yeah. Anyway, so no hate from my end about that. You write a check, you need to fucking cash it. So anyway, it says, yeah, though Danzig maintains he didn't lay a finger on him, video evidence tells a different story, with Glenn asking the confrontational Marianino what else they could have done given the situation. We went on exactly when we were supposed to. Why couldn't you go on after us? As words and tempers escalated, Danzig then shoves Marianino, who quickly retaliated with a knockout punch. Danzig has since commented on the incident, saying that was him, Marinino, trying to get me on camera, punching him so he could sue me or some shit. I forget what it was. When everyone was breaking it up, he cold-cocked me. What are you going to do? I mean, that's not what happened. The video suggests otherwise. Danzig went on to maintain that the whole thing was a coordinated, premeditated attack. Those were his guys with a camera. No one knows that. Well, back then they did. It was a setup. Maybe that's true. I mean, I don't know why anybody would film it, but anyways. Marinino went on to receive hundreds of online threats and pieces of hate mail from Danzig fans, which he kind of hilariously turned into a book. That book is now 10 years old, and it's getting a bit of a facelift. Per the press release, your summer reading is here. Don't ever punch a rock star, a collection of hate mail and other crazy rumors. Danny Marinino's first book is now back in print. De Wolf Publishing House celebrates this momentous occasion with the expanded 10th anniversary edition of Danny's riotously funny book. The aftermath of one fateful night in Tuba City might have broken most people, but not Danny. Instead, he turned hundreds of hateful emails and social media messages into comedy gold. In the 10 years since the book's original release, Danny has collected an all-new batch of the dramatically misspelled and grammatically challenged missives that have flooded his inbox since his first round one-punch KO. The revamped edition has a ton of new photos, new stories, new emails, a foreword by Gloria Cavalera, and of course, more hate. Find out what life is like after you knock out punk rock's favorite tough guy, in stock and shipping immediately. That's the issue as well. Glenn had such a, at that time, I should say, had such a reputation as being a total badass. I mean, he looked muscled up. He had a real aura of invincibility around him. He was also talking about the Jitkindo that he was doing and all that sort of thing. So people rightfully thought this dude was hard as fuck. And then I think perhaps some of that at the time might have gotten into his head, at which point, you are standing there talking to a dude, tempers are flaring, they're obviously fucked off about what's happened with the promoter. But I just think if you're going to lay hands on a guy, you need to expect consequences. If that guy is anything other than a complete and utter pussy, you need to expect consequences if you lay hands on a man. That's just life as a male in society. And as much as people would say, that's barbaric, blah, 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 it's fucking laws of nature. Things like that just don't change. Okay. Axl Rose takes a gnarly fall during a London concert, yet somehow doesn't miss a note. A lot of hate thrown the way of Axl for his appearance at Glastonbury, much as I forecast would happen on this very episode of, on this very segment of the show, back when it was first announced. I have no idea why they were booked for that fucking shitty festival. They are not a band that really belongs there. The other headliner, Elton John, and Lizzo, I think, was there as well. I mean, that kind of shite is more in the vein of Glastonbury. But I mean, at the very least, it seems like there were tons of people there. They were enjoying themselves. But a lot of people hating on Axl, and it is true. His voice is not what it once was. But I watched the video. I thought the band, did a pretty decent set. And I actually would go as far as to say Axl sounded a lot better than he sounded on several other videos that I've seen. I looked at the set list as well. A couple of glaring omissions, but in the main, didn't seem too bad. One thing that I should mention about Glastonbury is the irony of a festival that constantly proselytizes about net zero, lowering your carbon emissions and your carbon footprint. And this festival generates, by the reports that I've read, 2,000 tons in trash. On top of that, the entire weekend apparently saw several Z-list celebrities getting flown in by chopper. Fucking morons and no-name idiots like Holly Willoughby landing there to go and revel with the rest of the punters. But the very same people that, organize that fucking shit show, the very same people that are flying in with their choppers, the very same people that are wagging their finger at us about, taking a holiday or eating beef or driving a petrol car, somehow for them the rules don't apply. Which just emphasizes my point. They are not serious people and they should not be taken seriously. But also Glastonbury stinks. So, and I'd sooner pay not to go than actually ever go there. Right, watch James Hetfield mock Lars's drums at recent Metallica gig. Oh God, Saint Anger again. Fuck, I have to see this. You can say a lot about Metallica in the year 2023, but one thing you cannot take away from the Four Horsemen is that they have a refreshingly healthy sense of humor. It'd be pretty easy for the biggest band in the world to take themselves way too seriously. Thankfully, that is not the case at all. James Hetfield himself has clearly made peace with the never-ending hate that fans and press will throw at Saint Anger, which recently found itself on a worst albums ever Rolling Stones list. I would agree with that. On a tour last fall, Papa Het was proactively asking fans for their opinion on the album. Question for you, and you can honestly answer it to the best of your knowledge. Saint Anger? Asking the crowd to respond with a thumbs down or thumbs down, he ended up accidentally eliciting a large number of boos from the crowd. Taking it in stride, he seems to just laugh it off and then launches right into track 4 on Saint Anger, Dirty Window. He went on to talk about the songs from the album a few other times with some frankly great zingers. Here's a few highlights. That's from your favorite album, Saint Anger. Oh, come on, it's growing on you now. Just give it a little more time. You'll get it. Okay, 8 more songs from Saint Anger. Ready? Just kidding. This is the poor little album that gets so much shit. What do you think about Saint Anger? Don't lie to me, man. Fast forward to one of their recent gigs at the legendary Download Fest from a few weeks back, and Hetfield keeps the hilarious Saint Anger jesting going. Hearing Lars Ulrich's snare sound before launching into Moth into a Flame, he says, "Should we keep playing? Snare drum good." After Lars gives it a few whacks, James responds, "Oh God, Saint Anger again. Oh no, please, please no more torture." All right, we're going to have to check this out.
He did. He's still singing loud. I love it. Okay, should we keep playing? Snare drum, good? Oh God, Saint Anger again. Oh no. Please, no more torture. We just want to say thank you. I guess.
Yeah, that's fucking cool. And you know, they are right in that article. For a band as massive as Metallica to not be taking themselves too seriously, I think it's saying something. You know, there are other folks in the music industry. We just spoke about Axl Rose now. Can you imagine him poking fun at Chinese democracy on stage? No fucking chance. That's never going to happen. I mean, you know, we've got Bruce Dickinson in a headline next. I can't imagine that he would ever poke fun at any of maybe the more embarrassing outfits that he has worn over the course of his career. But the headline here, I should actually mention, when Bruce Dickinson personally paid the salaries of over 100 aviation employees out of pocket. It says here, at the end of the day, very few people like their employers. Any relationship involving money becomes easily strained. If an employer doesn't feel like they're receiving the service that they're paying for, blah, blah, blah. In his life outside of music, Iron Maiden frontman Bruce Dickinson wears seemingly countless professional hats. He's a Renaissance man all round. But perhaps his biggest passion is aviation. Now, it's one thing to be a hobbyist pilot, but Dickinson expanded his interest into a full-on business venture. They then go on to talk a little bit about that, and then they say, as reported at the time by Wales Online, Dickinson said of the situation, unfortunately, monies due to Cardiff Aviation will not be cleared in time for our maintenance, repair, and overall staff to be paid in full before the holiday weekend. I have therefore decided to personally pay 50% of wages owed in advance of Easter. I and the wider management team truly regret the situation and appreciate the impact that it will have on our team. We expressed our apologies to staff during a briefing earlier today and reaffirmed our commitment to address the shortfall as soon as possible. They do kind of make it sound a bit more generous than it is really. By what I'm picking up here, it's not like he's paying it out of pocket. It's not like he's not going to get the money back. And I would imagine that Bruce Dickinson, of all people, doesn't necessarily have a cash flow crisis to deal with right now. But that is a stand-up thing to do. I'll give it to him. I will definitely give that to him. Watch Nine Inch Nails' embarrassing appearance on Dance Party USA. Okay, we'll finish up with this one. It says here, given his body of work and his stoic outward appearance, you would be forgiven if you thought that Trent Reznor was humorless. The Nine Inch Nails mastermind deals almost exclusively in subjects that many consider to be at odds with established social norms. Depending on who you ask, irony is an artist's best friend or worst enemy. For those who don't take themselves entirely too seriously, there are few greater joys than engaging with some good-natured subversive camp. This is exactly what happened when Nine Inch Nails played on the corny as fuck late 80s live dance television program Dance Party USA. For the blissfully uninitiated dance or teen dance shows, which I know are a favorite of Evan Hopper of Quell, were woven into the tapestry of television programming for decades. From the early 50s until the turn of the century, shows like American Bandstand and Soul Train dominated the airwaves in celebration of youth culture and musical exuberance. For all of their external darkness, Nine Inch Nails do not outwardly appear like they'd go for for such a thing. But they were a new band with a new record to promote when they got the Dance Party USA offer, and as they say in the industry, a gig is a gig. In 2012, long before he left the platform in the midst of the great Elon Musk exodus, not really a great exodus, quite a few of those people have come back, my friend. But it says here, Reznor retweeted via Pitchfork. Many years ago, a young and naive Nine Inch Nails were asked what TV shows they'd be interested in appearing on. As a joke, and likely drunk, they thought of the most absurd choice they could come up with at the time. They were then informed their bluff had been called and they were actually booked on said show. They hopped in their Honda Civic touring vehicle and traveled many miles to New Jersey for the big show. They had a laugh making fun of the people, their fashion choices and hairstyles. Life was good. Years later, the internet discovered there's a moral in there somewhere. Come to think of it, Skrillex may indeed owe me some publishing for the hairdo. Let's check this out.
9 Inch Nails with Down in It.
Kinda like a cloud, I was up, way up in the sky, and I was feeling some feelings you wouldn't believe. Sometimes I don't believe in myself, and I decided I was never coming down. Just then a tiny little dot caught my eye. It was just about to fall asleep, but I watched it way too long. It was pulling me down.
I don't think there's anything embarrassing about that video. I think the fucking show is embarrassing. But I think, for the time, they were doing what they do. The song sounds fucking cool. I'm biased. I'm a massive Nine Inch Nails fan. I think Trent Reznor is a musical genius. A genuine musical genius. If you listen to the stuff that guy has done for film scores, with the, Nine Inch Nails back catalogue, he's a fucking master at what he does. But, I don't think this is bad. I think, if anything, they should have taken it to the next level, and they should have wrapped up that song with maybe the back end of Revolting Cox's Beers, Steers, and Queers. I think it's interesting to catch stuff like that. Very curious as to how many people would have watched that and gone, actually, this Nine Inch Nails stuff is pretty decent. Anyways, my friends, that has been fun, but it is now over because it's time to wrap the show up for this week. Thanks for sticking around until the very end if you have done so. Next week, if all goes to plan, I will be back with Katie Irizarry of Suspiria PR for a conversation laden with spice. For now, I want to say thank you very much to Rune Eriksen for his time. Make sure you check out that Ruim record. Make sure you check out Quell, and make sure you check out Ekrom. More importantly, make sure you stay safe, stay healthy, and I will see all of you bad motherfuckers again next week.